Larry Raske, who is a Massachusetts Democratic strategist, knows Warren very well, and has worked for Vice President Biden going back to the 1980s, is quoted on the record in the Boston Globe this morning saying, "I think that would be a great ticket." Warren, Biden, Warren. You don't say that publicly unless you're trying to stir up mischief.
It is. As trial balloons go, this is not subtle, right? And I think it's very smart on the part of Biden's team, if they wanted to gauge the interest in this, to have something very high profile, very public like this, and to do it by way of Elizabeth Warren, whose supporters are the real up-for-grabs faction of the Democratic Party. It's supporters of Elizabeth Warren who've largely gravitated to Bernie Sanders, created a big headache for Hillary Clinton. So much of this is about Hillary's weakness and her sort of skyrocketing negative ratings, her inability to completely consolidate the Democratic Party in the way that she foresaw. So, you know, whatever Joe Biden ends up deciding, this is a real statement of the sort of vacuum that seems to exist in the Democratic race right now.
And getting Elizabeth Warren's, hat tip or at least subtle blessing would almost immediately help Biden bridge the divide between the super left of the Bernie Sanders supporters and the more establishment Democratic support the Clinton interest. He'd be right there in the middle, draw from both of them, probably start to nudge Bernie Sanders out of the race and make it a much more serious race between these two poles. And the other thing he probably has to consider is the fact that, remember, she was a bankruptcy lawyer back in the, or bankruptcy law expert, and there are elements of his past that would probably run into trouble with her. This was probably designed also to just sort of, like you said, feel her out on economic policy, make clear where he stands, so that way if he does jump in and she gets asked, she'll at least say, well, good luck to him, man.
Someone familiar with Warren's side of this said they discussed economic issues. I think that's an incomplete answer of what they discussed, but I don't think that it's necessarily false. Elizabeth Warren is someone who clearly cares about her issues, who decided not to run and focus on those issues, and you have to raise that question. If she was not willing to put herself on the line to run for president herself, how far would she really go to support a Joe Biden candidacy? That's got to be a serious question at this point. Like, how much can he really get out of Elizabeth Warren, although he's already a lot simply by having a meeting like that.
Right, he had the meeting, and so if he has the meeting, what signal does that send to Hillary Clinton and her supporters? Elizabeth Warren is willing to do this on a Saturday. He's the vice president. You don't say no to the vice president of the United States, but there are different ways to have a meeting. This is done on a Saturday. Shockingly, it leaked out. Good for our reporters here at CNN for having that story first. But both people are sending a message here.
Well, you have to keep in mind, as much as this is about the vacuum in the Democratic Party and some of Hillary's weaknesses, it's also about Elizabeth Warren's strength. And remember, Hillary met with Elizabeth Warren privately in December before she was getting ready to officially announce. Now Biden does this. He's the sitting vice president, but in a way he comes to her. He was supposed to be down in Delaware all day. He travels back to D.C. And again, people familiar with Elizabeth Warren thinking this is exactly what she wants. These are kiss the ring meetings, but she wants to wield as much influence as possible on the issues that she cares about, which is financial regulation and economic policy. And if she can do that by having basically Democratic candidates tripping all over themselves to get her endorsement or the support of her supporters, that's a win for her.
You mean she wasn't just checking out the Naval Observatory for the Biden-Warren ticket? It's a nice house the vice president gets there. Look, we're laughing about this, but it's a serious meeting. And you mentioned Hillary Clinton's weaknesses. It's come around the table. Let's look. Just in the last week, as Joe Biden nears his decision, look at this. These are Quinnipiac polls. Look at Florida. Clinton loses to Bush, Rubio, and Trump. Now, that's August, year before the election, but Democrats are talking about this. We shouldn't put too much stock in this, but trust me, Democrats are talking about this. Move on to Ohio. Clinton wins over Bush and over Trump, loses to Marco Rubio. All of those are very, very close races there. But again, you could say Ohio. Why isn't Hillary Clinton doing better there? Now let's move on to Pennsylvania, a state the Democrats have won forever in presidential politics. And yes, Bush beats Clinton narrowly. Rubio beats Clinton. Clinton does beat Trump narrowly. Now look at this. In all of these states, is Hillary Clinton honest and trustworthy? That is why Joe Biden is seriously thinking there's an opening to get into this race. 64% in Florida say no. 60% in